KIT.
Oh, yeah. Getting her done. Talking behind the scenes, bragging on our friends at the Union Gospel Mission and their thrift stores. And we'll probably hear the progress on the most recent one. Or I know I saw Mike Johnson talking about donations are coming in. So I don't know if they're open for biz, but we'll find out because he's here to talk about all of that.
He's right there.
And more.
Well, good morning.
Morning, Mike. Good to see you. I had such a fun time and good experience at both the Lighthouse Thrift Shop and the Union Gospel Mission store there on, what is it, Lincoln?
20th and Lincoln, yeah.
20th and Lincoln. I found two fabulous bookshelves that are now doing duty in my basement, holding my precious magic books. I got the coolest little glass, I don't know, it just caught my eye. It was a little glass pelican, one of those see-through glass things, but it had a colored fish in its tummy, and it just, the whimsical nature of it just caught my eye, and for $3.90, I now have this cool little tchotchke thing that I get great pleasure just looking at for some reason.
Well, I'm pretty sure that all of your listeners think of Dave Edel and whimsical nature in the same sentence, you know, like they understand.
Good. I hope they do. Anyway, the Lighthouse Thrift Shop is just really a fantastic place. There's so much stuff in there, and it looks so good. And the people were so nice.
Oh, thank you so much.
Megan and Chloe and everybody. I mean, I was totally impressed. And it's a great place to shop. There's some tremendous stuff in there. And like I say, I got a couple of bookshelves for way less than I was going to have to pay otherwise. So
this is the thing. This is one of the neatest things about God, I think. If you'll forgive me a little commercial for Jesus for a quick second. But we are the Union Gospel Mission.
We're not getting in the way of that.
So, you know, and one of the neatest things about God is that everything He asks us to do for others, we find ourselves blessed, you know, in the process. Everything He asks us to do for Him, we find ourselves blessed in the process. And so, like, in God's economy, there's only winners. There aren't winners and losers. And so folks are able to donate their things to the store. They're able to get rid of the stuff that they don't need, but they're also able to know that that it's going to a cause. It's going to actually help people in need. The folks down at the missionary, you know, our staff send up a list so that the folks at the stores have this list of all of our needs, you know, and the first thing they do is make sure that those needs are met, and then everything that they don't need to meet those needs, they are able to sell on the floor, which is able to help support the mission.
Sure. And
so it's like just like everybody wins. So it's just like win, 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 win all the way around. It's actually, there aren't enough places like that in life, and so it's really fun to see at the store, you know. So yeah, I find it just so encouraging as well.
Summit Thrift opening May 1st.
As close to May 1st as we can get.
Okay.
I think that May 1st is best understood in air quotes here. But we're doing our best.
We want to talk to you about mentality, guns, all that stuff, but we've got to get this out of the way. And you're taking donations there now,
yes,
right?
We are, yes. So we got a donation truck there, and we receive donations there, and we take over to the Lincoln store at 20th and Lincoln to process them all.
Hey, look at making the store look great, the building, really upgrading
it's really
the
coming
building.
along, isn't it?
Yeah.
So one of the neat things that the way this stuff works, right, is the landlord has had an empty building there for a very long time, and so they're really happy to have somebody in there renting the place.
Yeah.
But because it's sat empty for so long, they understand that there's some sprucing up that's going to happen.
Yeah, sure.
But you wait. Typically, if you're a landlord, you wait until you get a lease to do all that stuff. You don't usually dump all that money into the property just on spec, because then you could end up dumping a bunch of money in property and then not get a lease, right? And so they typically they'll wait for somebody to sign the lease, and then they'll do all that work. And the work specified in the lease is what are called landlord improvements, and so it's just been really cool to see again the win-win, right? So the Mission gets a great place to do a store, the landlords get renters, and then everybody gets a beautified building in the process too. And so
shoppers
God
like
has been
Dave
so kind.
come in and get great deals and come on the radio
exactly.
and blab
Go
about
away
it.
with glass pelicans with little fish in their bellies.
I know, it's awesome.
That's great.
I like to get some fish tacos, and that way there's a little fish in my belly too.
Well, I don't know if it would be as colorful or as attractive.
I don't think
as
it would
this
be
one
nearly
is.
as attractive.
Hey, to let you know, it is 7:24.
Yeah, let's get on to this other stuff. Yeah.
And if you can, stay through the bottom of the hour. Can you do that?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll
Good.
need to.
Okay.
I've got to get the kids to school, so I need to scoot away as close to 8 as I can.
Okay.
But,
All right.
Yeah.
All right. And I don't know where to quite to start here, but we've had a number of shootings. We even had this machete incident at the Home Depot, in which maybe someone was suffering from some type of mental illness. What's your thoughts on the whole mental illness and access to guns and
Right. So I called in recently to talk about this because Dave was having this very spirited dialogue with a caller who was saying essentially, hey, I'm not really excited about the idea of somebody somewhere deciding that I might be dangerous and therefore I need to have my guns taken away from me just because somebody else decided I was dangerous. And Dave was saying, yeah, I get it. And yet we've also got all these shootings. What are we going to do? And so I called in to basically say, look, the problem here is that we're focusing on the gun rather than focusing on the mental health of the person that's involved, and that generally speaking, it's very, very, very difficult to get someone into involuntary care. It is extraordinarily difficult.
And you know that.
Oh, and we know it because we try to do it a lot of the time, right? Because we're seeing people that are harming themselves. And the standard is that that harm has to be imminent, right? This imminent threat of harm. And by imminent, what I mean, like it's going to happen, like right now, kind of thing.
Posing with a knife. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Like somebody, going into Home Depot with a machete. Well, that's an imminent threat of harm to themselves or to others. But if the threat isn't imminent, then they don't meet the standards of involuntary care. So what I think is the most helpful thing for us to think about in terms of red flag laws and gun, because I'm a gun owner and a military veteran, and I feel very strongly about the principle of individual sovereignty, and that means that I have police powers over my own self. I need to be able to protect myself, and that's intrinsic to a free society. And yet, the problem with these red flag laws is that what they're really saying is, hey, you might be dangerous enough, right, for us to restrict your constitutional rights in terms of firearm ownership, but we're not sure if you're dangerous enough for us to actually require you to get mental health care. And, and like, what? Wait a second. If you're that dangerous that we need to take away or that potentially dangerous, right, that we need to take away your guns, well, then let's actually get you some mental health care. And if you're not so dangerous that you actually need to be required to get mental health care, then by what right do we have to take your guns away? And so the focus really needs to be on the standard of requiring people to get mental health care. And that fixes this entire dialogue.
But we in a sense, we don't want to make it broken. We don't want to make it easier, do we? I mean, because don't we risk people saying, my crazy uncle needs to go to jail today?
Families of the 8 people killed in Indianapolis, the 10 people killed in Boulder, the pick your shootings. I mean, yes, here's the deal. You encroach on somebody somewhere, somehow. Otherwise, it's just a shoot 'em up, lawless society, mental health people running wild, guns everywhere. So if as a society we're going to take some sort of regulatory step somewhere, then is it not better to encroach on those people that need the help rather than on everybody else who has a gun?
Well, so Lance's point, and it's a good point, and it's a fair point, right? Like,
quit sucking up.
Well, is is that just like your caller was saying, hey, it's the point of your caller, which was that I'm not sure how excited I am about nameless, faceless people I've never met deciding I'm mentally ill and therefore things need to happen to me, right?
Right.
And I get that, right? What I would say is this. I think that if we were to open up the phone lines and ask your callers, do they think that it's too easy to get someone mental health care, or that it's too hard to get someone mental health care? Mm-hmm. They would probably say the pendulum is out of balance and that it's too hard, right? And so this is what theoretically representative democracy protects against, and that when these kinds of things are out of balance, we're supposed to be able to fix them, because public policy is supposed to be being set by the people that we elect, instead of nameless, faceless bureaucrats someplace that have been empowered through the legislature giving away all of its power, and now it's regulated to somebody else, and then it's all opacity and there's no transparency, and we don't have any ability to fix anything, and that creates jaded cynicism and hopelessness. And nobody knows how to fix this problem, but this problem is totally fixable, and it's by actually enacting the constitutional system we have, which is requiring our legislators to actually do their jobs, and really create policy instead of farming out policy to other folks that are theoretically experts. Because let's look at this. Let's look at the outcomes of these theoretical experts. Which is not a slam on anybody individually. It's just, let's look at the outcome. Would society agree that we've set the balance point correctly? And I think 90% of people would say no.
Yeah.
He said opacity on the radio.
Yeah, he did. I'm looking that up.
As opposed to your glass penguin, which had transparency.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Well, he's absolutely right, because not only, what you're talking about is a trend, not only in farming it out in mental health decisions, but in environment. We have bureaucrats. We have thousands of employees doing the jobs that legislators were elected to do. Head man Mike Johnson is in the studio with us this morning. And keep in mind a couple of things about Mike, in that he's a former military ranger. He is a mountain climbing kind of guy. He's not a, what's the word I'm looking for? He's not sort of your academic bookwormy kind of guy who is running the gospel mission. He's a guy who's lived some life, seen some things, done some things, and has had an approach that's worked. He is, with all due respect to everybody who's ever done the jobs before, he is an interesting, exciting breath of fresh air, proactive, hands-on, let's get it done kind of guy here, and that's one of the reasons we love having him in. We were talking about mental health. He sees it and deals with it every day. So many of the broken people in our society are dealing with substance abuse and with mental health issues, and he's trying to save them all if he can, and God bless him for it. But a big part of that is an understanding of mental health and how it works, and mental health is so tied in with the mass criminal deaths that we see in our country. In fact, here's an article right now on today's Drudge Report. Unidentified gunman said by police to have psychiatric problems drives into the Texas City airport at 2:30, begins firing his gun. Police returns fire, stops the guy from getting inside. Police hail him as a hero. And the article says a gunman with mental issues was shot and killed after driving up to the terminal in San Antonio's airport, opening fire. Just another example of mentally ill people. So it's written as though this guy had a track record and they knew of it, but I don't know that for a fact. But in so many instances, we have trails that point right to mental health issues, and yet we want to go after guns from millions of law-abiding people who have a right, constitutional right to have them. And so Mike's here to talk a little bit about that. Mike, I guess the question would be, could someone like you write the involuntary confinement laws? I mean, you got enough experience to help determine that, so that we can get people in to help themselves. People see it as like our whole mindset was turn them loose, a couple decades ago.
It was more than a couple decades ago. Deinstitutionalization started in the 60s, and it was really codified with the Social Security Act, and so the Social Security Act changed the way in which the federal government was compensating states for inpatient mental health care, to favor community clinics, because we were just starting to invent mental health drugs in the 60s, and everybody was like, hey, this is going to fix it. We don't have to warehouse folks, and so in the 50s we had 500,000 inpatient mental health beds and a nation of 105 million people, and now we have about 50,000, like 1/10, and a nation of 300 million people, and so we just really don't have a lot of beds in the end. And I think that what's happened is not necessarily that the laws are bad, though I do think that there's an update to our law would be good, to add something called a need for treatment standard. And you don't need me to write it, Dave. There's states that have involuntary treatment acts that have need for treatment standards. Arizona is one of them, for example. So there's plenty of model legislation out there that's being enacted. The main problem is the willingness to actually use it, right? The willingness to actually say, hey, you need to get into care here. And the systems and the folks that run these systems are just so incredibly concerned about not going where Lance is afraid of people going, where you're just sort of rounding up people that don't really need treatment because we decide you're unwell. That they're so unwilling to do that they would much rather take the step of, well, let's just take all the guns away.
Right.
It's sort of like, if you're a foster parent and you've got to lock up all the knives and you got to, and all that stuff. And yet the problem, right, is that in order that ends up treating everybody like a foster kid and like a kid, and all the folks that don't have problems, they can't have their guns either, because we don't actually want to require the people that need help to get help. And so that's where it really needs to, the change needs to happen, is in how we think about getting people mental health care, because it's not cruel to get people help that they need. It's cruel to deny people help that they need.
Amen.
Do we have
absolutely.
a bunch of people on the street in Yakima that need that kind of help?
Absolutely. On Monday, we're doing at the Mission a memorial service for some folks that have passed away in homelessness recently. One of them is a guy who died of an overdose. Pretty much the day after I saw him with out on the outreach van, and we know, all of us knew, like, this guy needs treatment, and yet he doesn't meet the standards that would actually get him into care involuntarily. And the next day he OD'd and went brain dead, and then a few days later the family took him off life support. And now we're going to do a memorial service for him. And it didn't have to be that way. But it's, Dave, part of it's the law, but a big part of it is our willingness to use the law we actually have. And to understand that when someone's substance use disorder, which is a diagnosable mental health disorder, right, when it takes them to the streets, they are now an imminent threat of harm to themselves or others. So we could use the law we have, we just don't, because we're so deeply concerned about
All right, who gets to
not
make
going
that?
back to the 50s.
Who makes that call? Who gets to make the call at the moment on the street? Is that a law enforcement guy? Is that why when they say we need to have more mental health workers with our police, that they could make that call? How does it work?
No, so there's somebody called a designated crisis responder, who's a mental health professional who's been certified to be a designated crisis responder, and any designated crisis responder can do a mental health detention on somebody for 72 hours, but they need a bed to put them in. Right, and then if they're going to hold them for longer than 72 hours, then it's going to go before a judge, and the judge is going to review them, and then they'll generally look at 7 to 14 days, and the whole goal is to get somebody stabilized and get them into a treatment regime, and then get them out of the bed as fast as they can.
Can you not be that person?
Potentially, like, I don't think I have the academic credentials that are required. I think, but
what are you doing at night?
Could we have?
Why aren't you studying?
Could the mission have its own DCR? Yeah, potentially. And that's still not necessarily going to solve the issue that we need to solve, nor is it necessarily going to address in any way these issues around red flag laws and guns. So I might be able to get a couple of folks into a bed easier, potentially, right? I mean, we talked about it internally, but these large systemic changes or these large systemic problems, are going to require, a larger and more systemic response, and that we need to be more willing to get folks the care that they need, but can't choose for themselves precisely because of the illness that requires the need for the care.
Yeah. Are you sign off that you're crazy? But I'm not.
what?
he said as he was climbing up the outside of the building.
Right. You know, so what we tried to do is we tried to say, hey, to destigmatize mental health stuff, we said, hey, this is a medical problem, right? You know,
Right.
and yet the ethic in medical care is informed consent. And yet the problems of mental health, you know, make someone unable to give the consent for the care, and so it becomes this sort of this trap, right? And that we've got to
You're
get
not
things out.
you're a bright, brilliant guy. I mean, I love talking to you because of that. But
Thank
you're
you.
not the.
Oh, I thought you were
And
talking
Mike
to me.
is too.
I thought you were talking
and
to
Mike
me.
is too.
Mike is too.
I agree, Lance is a bright and brilliant guy. He occasionally reads news that is out of date, but other than that, you know.
Oh, bingo.
Oh,
But the point being is there's got to be other people in the mental health professions out there and in places of influence that have reached the same conclusions you have about our system, right?
Sure. Now you're going to get in. Now you just pushed the button for me. Okay, so it goes like this. Inpatient mental health care is very expensive, and states you know really don't have as much money as they'd like. Right? They're always looking for more money. And my personal belief is that public employees are very, very expensive because we pension a bunch of them that we don't necessarily need to pension. And King County pensions Metro bus drivers, for example, and so we're really going to have to look at some of the ways in which government is apportioning its resources and make this a higher priority. And so, you know, there seems to be enough money for the folks in Olympia, and there never seems to be enough money for this.
I'll tell you what.
Wow.
$10 on every $200 worth of value of a firearm purchased. You don't think the gun to be left alone? You don't think the gun people would pay an extra $10 or $20 on the cost of a pistol if they knew that was going to mental health, so that people would focus on that and not focus on their guns?
I think that's possible, but as a gun owner, what I would want is some transparency around what is the money actually doing, what are the measurable outcomes associated with it, and how am I going to be reported back, you know, by folks on this is what we actually did with your money, and that's what
understood, and that's
what
all
the mission does, right?
But
So
that's all workable. You could do all of that. The point is, if we're not doing it, if we're not putting people in because we don't have the money to do it, we could generate some money by gun users. Keep in mind, the end result of doing nothing is the continued pressure on gun people.
Sure, but here's the vice, Dave, is that, and by vice I don't mean a bad habit. I mean like a table vice, a squeeze from two sides. Is that the folks that would love to enact that tax because they always are looking for more money are exactly the folks that are not very excited about using that money for what you would want them to use it for. And so it doesn't almost matter whether they have the money or not. They don't necessarily want to do the thing that you want to do with the money. And so getting them the money doesn't fix anything because they don't want to use it for what you want them to use it for. And to change that is going to require legislation. And to do that is going to require, I don't know what, right? Because in Yakima, it's not exactly like our priorities are, have a big pull in Olympia. So, I authentically, you start despairing. You start going, okay, well, is there a way to change any of this stuff?
That's where I'm coming from.
And I think that that's a little bit, I'm a homelessness expert and I'm not necessarily a legislation moving expert, but I can't see any way to get this stuff fixed without some massive kind of public pressure on our legislators and a lot of clarity, and that's going to mean a big money and PR push and all that kind of stuff, and you just don't see money going into politics for that kind of stuff. You see it going in for other things, and the money that could be going in to protect gun rights is focused on, hey, I have gun rights, rather than focusing on, hey, you need to fix the mental health system instead of try to take my gun rights. And so, maybe there's some improvement that could be made there.
Interesting. 7:58. We're talking with Yakima Union Gospel Mission Director Mike Johnson. Mike, I hear you talking, but I think the biggest problem right now that we see is that these mental health folks are not only harming themselves, but we're concerned when they go into a store and start shooting other people. How do we stop that part of it rather than? I mean, I guess, and that is, you know. And I guess that's the $1 million question.
Well, so that's again.
They're dangerous to themselves, but geez, when they're dangerous to everyone else, is there a difference?
Well, so this is back to where we really need to take a look at the time frame, right, around what does it mean to be an imminent threat. And the possession of a gun doesn't make you an imminent threat, because imminence is about time. It's not about the potential damage. And so what we've got to be able to do is understand that when somebody is potentially dangerous, they can be dangerous with a car, they can be dangerous with a knife, they can be dangerous with a gun, and we need to be more willing to get folks into care. You're going to have to get upstream from it, or you're going to have armed guards outside of places, and that's
we may be there, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that's what
man.
It took at San Antonio Airport.
Yeah.
Yep. Hey, thanks for letting us talk about this. This is hard stuff, and it's not necessarily immediately solvable. But I think it's really important to help people know how to think about this stuff, because if we're going to get to solutions, we're going to have to get there with clear thinking and not just emotional reactivity. And I'm pretty, like I said earlier, I'm pretty ardently committed to my not just constitutional right, Dave, my natural right to protect myself from harm. I have a natural right to do that. The Constitution is merely recognizing my natural right to do so. That right is not bestowed upon me by the Constitution. It is recognized in the Constitution.
Understood.
And so I have a pretty strong commitment to that. And yet, we've got to have clear thinking about what's really broken and how to fix it if we're ever going to fix it.